Picture this. It's a quiet evening, and a family gathers to lay their loved one to rest. Instead of a traditional burial, they opt for cremation, a choice that stirs questions and debates among those present. Does this practice align with biblical teachings? What does the Bible actually say about cremation? Let's unravel this deeply personal and spiritual topic together. In biblical times, burial was the primary method of honoring the dead. This practice wasn't merely cultural, but often reflected deep spiritual significance. For instance, Abraham's purchase of the cave of Machpelah in Genesis 23 wasn't just a practical decision. It was a testament to his faith in God's promises. Burial practices, like wrapping the body in linen and anointing it with spices, also symbolized care and reverence. However, it's important to understand that cremation was not widespread in ancient Israel, partly because surrounding pagan cultures often practiced it. The Israelites' preference for burial was a way to distinguish their worship of Yahweh from neighboring religions. But does this mean cremation was inherently wrong, or was it simply about cultural identity? This historical backdrop sets the stage for understanding how burial became the default practice among God's people. The Bible doesn't shy away from mentioning burial, but it references cremation sparingly. A notable example is in 1 Samuel 31:12, where the bodies of Saul and his sons, desecrated by the Philistines, are burned by the men of Jabesh Gilead. Afterward, their bones are buried under a tamarisk tree, symbolizing a final act of honor. In contrast, burial is repeatedly shown as a standard practice. Verses like Genesis 3:19, "For dust you are, and to dust you shall return," emphasize a natural return to the earth. The burial of Moses in Deuteronomy 34:5-6, orchestrated by God himself, underscores the sacredness of this act. While cremation appears as an exception, the Bible does not explicitly condemn it, leaving room for interpretation. Theological concerns about cremation often center around the resurrection of the body. Christians believe in a bodily resurrection, as described in 1 Corinthians 15:42-44. The body that is sown is perishable, it is raised imperishable. Some worry that cremation might conflict with this doctrine, but it's crucial to remember that God's power transcends physical conditions. Consider this. Believers who died in catastrophic events or whose bodies were destroyed are still part of the promise of resurrection. God's omnipotence ensures that no matter the state of the body, he can restore it. This assurance has led many theologians to conclude that the method of body disposition, whether burial or cremation, does not hinder God's redemptive plan. Christian attitudes toward cremation have evolved over time, often influenced by cultural and historical contexts. In the early church, cremation was largely avoided because it was associated with pagan rituals, such as Roman cremations that symbolized the release of the soul into the afterlife. By the Middle Ages, burial became firmly entrenched as the Christian norm, symbolizing respect for the body and hope in resurrection. However, as societies modernized, practical considerations like space limitations in cemeteries and economic factors led to a gradual acceptance of cremation. Today, the practice is no longer seen as a marker of paganism, but rather a personal and logistical choice for many Christians. One common misconception is that cremation denies the doctrine of resurrection. This stems from a misunderstanding of God's ability to resurrect the body, regardless of its state. Another misconception is that choosing cremation reflects a lack of faith. On the contrary, many Christians who choose cremation do so while maintaining a deep trust in God's promises. It's also worth addressing the idea that burial is the only holy method of honoring the dead. While it has biblical precedence, the Bible doesn't explicitly command burial or forbid cremation, leaving the decision open to individual conviction and cultural considerations. Religious leaders often bring nuanced perspectives to this discussion. For example, Pope Francis has affirmed that cremation is acceptable within the Catholic Church, provided the ashes are treated with reverence and kept in a sacred place. Similarly, Protestant leaders emphasize that the heart's posture towards God matters more than the method of burial. Pastor John Piper once noted that while burial may symbolize hope in resurrection more clearly, cremation does not nullify that hope. Such insights help Christians navigate this decision without fear or guilt, focusing instead on the eternal truths of their faith. Modern perspectives on cremation reflect a growing acceptance among Christians. Surveys indicate that a significant number of believers see cremation as a practical and respectful option. Environmental concerns, financial constraints, and cultural shifts have all contributed to this trend. Churches are increasingly recognizing this shift, offering services that incorporate cremation in ways that honor both the deceased and biblical principles. This evolution underscores a broader understanding that the essence of Christian faith lies in the hope of resurrection, not in the specifics of burial practices. Cremation and burial both have roots in history and faith, but neither is a definitive measure of one's devotion or destiny. The Bible highlights the sanctity of the body and the hope of resurrection, but it does not dictate a single method of post-death care. As Christians, we are called to make choices that reflect our faith and respect for God's creation. Whether cremation or burial, the focus should remain on the eternal promise of life through Christ. What are your thoughts on cremation in light of the Bible? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more thought-provoking discussions.